found footage genre has positioned itself as one of the most effective ways to generate terror, intrigue, and a sense of realism that few films can convey. By using the found footage format, these stories put us in the perspective of those documenting the events, making us feel like direct witnesses to situations that defy logic and reason. This creates an immersive experience that grabs us from the very first moment, transporting us to a reality where the supernatural, the monstrous, and the unknown seem within reach. Over the years, several films have skillfully exploited this style, each bringing something unique to the genre, whether through innovative approaches, claustrophobic atmospheres, or mysteries that keep us hooked on the story. Because of this, in this list, we will explore the 7 best found footage films, those that have left a mark on cinema and effectively use the power of found footage to provoke chills and unleash our most primal fears. From paranormal events to catastrophic disasters, each of these films invites us to dive into a world where the camera becomes our only connection to what appears to be raw reality. Number 7. Chronicle, 2012. The inclusion of Chronicle at number 7 on this list is due to its innovative approach to the found footage genre, blending elements of science fiction, superheroes, and teenage drama in a way that few films have managed. And although it's not a traditional horror film, its use of the found footage format to tell a more intimate and personal story about discovering extraordinary powers is what makes it stand out. This approach adds a touch of realism, making us feel like we're watching events through the character's own eyes, bringing a sense of authenticity and closeness to the story. The film follows the story of 3 teenage friends, Andrew, Matt, and Steve. After finding a mysterious object in an underground tunnel, they discover they've acquired telekinetic abilities. From that moment, they decide to document their experiences with a camera, establishing the found footage format that defines the film. Andrew, the protagonist, is a socially isolated young man with a complicated family life marked by an abusive father and a sick mother. The camera becomes his way of processing his reality and disconnecting from the pain of his everyday life. Upon gaining powers, Andrew finally feels he has control over something in his life, leading him down a path of self-discovery and ultimately self-destruction. As the 3 friends explore and develop their abilities, they initially do so in a carefree, fun manner, testing their powers with tricks and pranks. But soon, the nature of these powers shifts, especially for Andrew, who sees an opportunity for revenge and to impose his will. The story delves into how absolute power can corrupt, and how a troubled teenager can become dangerous when given the ability to overcome human limitations. This is a dark exploration of human vulnerability when faced with power beyond comprehension. The film cleverly uses the handheld camera format, not limiting itself to the perspective of a single camera, but incorporating other viewpoints like security cameras and cell phones to expand the story's vision without losing the essence of found footage. The flight sequences and aerial battles are filmed in a way that feels chaotic, yet authentic, showcasing great technical skill in the genre and making the viewer feel as if they are watching something captured realistically despite the clearly supernatural events. Andrew's arc turns him into a tragic anti-hero, a figure who starts with good intentions but is quickly overwhelmed by his own inner darkness. The film thus becomes a sort of character study, exploring the darker side of someone who could have been a hero if circumstances had been different. This adds a level of depth not often seen in superhero films, especially in the found footage genre. Andrew's tragedy contrasts with Matt and Steve's hope as they try to maintain a moral perspective even when faced with the temptation of their newfound powers. Chronicle deserves a place on this list not only for its innovative genre blend, but for showing how the found footage format can be used to tell an emotional and human story, even in a science fiction context. The film immerses us in the lives of the characters in a way that makes them feel real and relatable, and its ending leaves us reflecting on the nature of power and its devastating effects when it falls into the wrong hands.
God! Help me! Please get me out of here!
Number 6, VHS 2012. VHS ranks at number 6 on this list due to its original approach of blending the found footage style with a series of horror stories in an anthology format, bringing a fresh and distinct perspective to both subgenres. As a collection of short films within a narrative framework that also uses the found footage format, the film explores different facets of horror, from the paranormal to the grotesque, allowing each segment to offer something new and chilling. This makes it ideal for horror lovers looking for a varied and unpredictable experience. Although some stories vary in quality, the disturbing atmosphere and constant tension throughout make this film a landmark in the genre. VHS is a horror anthology composed of several segments directed by different filmmakers, all connected through a main narrative. The story centers on a group of criminals tasked with retrieving a VHS tape from an abandoned house. Once inside, they find a room filled with televisions and videotapes, and upon playing them, they witness a series of disturbing recordings. Each of these recordings becomes an independent short that explores different horror themes. One of the movie's greatest strengths is its anthology format, allowing each story to be unique and have its own tone. This gives the directors the freedom to explore various horror styles, from supernatural creatures to dark rituals and psychological threats. Since each story is told from a found footage perspective, the film maintains a sense of immediacy and realism, making even the most fantastical or supernatural elements feel authentic, as if we're watching forbidden recordings that were never meant to be found. Amateur Night, directed by David Bruckner, is one of the film's standout segments. In this story, a group of friends hides a camera in a pair of glasses to record a night out, but things take a terrifying turn when a mysterious girl they meet turns out to be much more dangerous than she appears. The first-person perspective and rising tension make this segment one of the creepiest in the anthology. Second Honeymoon by Ty West explores a slower psychological tension where a couple on a road trip is stalked by an unknown figure. The sense of vulnerability and isolation in this segment is amplified through the found footage format. Each story, though different in approach and style, maintains an atmosphere of unease and the feeling that the viewer is watching something they shouldn't, a signature feature of the series. The central plot of the criminals searching for a tape in the abandoned house serves to connect the various segments of the film and adds an additional layer of mystery and tension. As they progress, they realize something dark lurks in the house, contributing to a growing sense of terror that intertwines with the stories on the tapes. This approach allows the film to maintain a steady rhythm, giving viewers small breaks between horror scenes, though each return to the main story brings a sense of impending danger. Unlike other found footage films that try to polish the presentation, VHS feels deliberately chaotic, with distorted images, abrupt cuts, and video quality emulating old VHS tapes, hence the title, adding to its retro horror atmosphere. This imperfect aesthetic becomes part of its charm, reinforcing the idea that we're watching unauthorized recordings captured in moments of desperation or pure terror. For all these reasons, VHS earns its place on this list for its unique approach. By combining an anthology structure with found footage, it offers a varied horror experience that keeps viewers on edge. Perfect for those who enjoy raw and diverse horror, this movie takes the number 6 spot as a staple of experimental horror. Number 5, The Taking of Deborah Logan, 2014. The Taking of Deborah Logan earns its place at number 5 for its ability to combine the real fear of a degenerative disease such as dementia with supernatural horror, effectively using the found footage format. The film stands out for how it turns the clinical into something terrifying, with a documentary style that reinforces a sense of authenticity and realism, making the paranormal elements even more unsettling. As the protagonist's deterioration progresses, viewers witness a terrifying transformation where the psychological and supernatural fuse disturbingly. The constant tension and the slow manifestation of evil make this film a unique and chilling experience, worthy of its spot on this list. This horror film, directed by Adam Robitel, uses the mockumentary format to tell the story of a film crew documenting the life of Deborah Logan, an elderly woman suffering from Alzheimer's. What begins as a medical study of Deborah's mental decline quickly transforms into a tale of demonic possession, as the illness seems to trigger inexplicable and terrifying events. Initially, the film realistically presents the effects of Alzheimer's, adding a touch of authenticity to the story. Deborah's mental degradation is shown with rawness, making the viewer empathize with her situation and that of her daughter Sarah. This initial approach causes the scariest moments to feel more real, as it combines the everyday horror of losing mental faculties with the supernatural elements that develop later. This blurs the line between what could be mental deterioration and what could be a demonic presence, creating a persistent tension. The film crew is there to document Deborah's Alzheimer's symptoms, which initially gives the film a clinical and observational tone. However, as strange events begin to occur, the film shifts in tone, taking the viewer from a medical experience to a supernatural journey. The cameras capture Deborah doing disturbing things, like standing in the dark, speaking in tongues, and moving unnaturally. These moments, filmed through security cameras and the crew's lens, heighten the sense of vulnerability and helplessness for both the characters and the audience. The film suggests a connection between Deborah's illness and her possession, as if her loss of self has opened a door to a dark entity. This creates an intriguing dynamic where it's unclear if the evil affecting Deborah comes from an internal deterioration or an external force, which is unsettling and offers an ambiguous interpretation. This ambiguity is what makes the film stand out in the found footage genre, as it plays with the viewer's perception, making them question what is real and what is supernatural. The taking of Deborah Logan is known for scenes that have become iconic in the genre, such as the sequence where Deborah dislocates her jaw in an unnatural way and tries to eat a young girl. These images are striking and memorable, serving as examples of how found footage can leverage the unexpected to create truly terrifying moments. The footage captured through moving cameras and abrupt cuts contributes to a tense, chaotic atmosphere, making the audience feel as if they're witnessing a true nightmare caught on tape. The film does not offer easy answers and leaves several loose ends, which reinforces its unsettling atmosphere. By not completely closing the story, viewers are left with a lingering sense of discomfort that persists after the credits roll. This also gives it a realistic documentary feel, as real stories often lack perfect closure, and this final ambiguity contributes to making the film memorable and leaving a strong impression. Number 4, Cloverfield, 2008. Cloverfield ranks at number 4 on this list because not many giant monster movies have dared to use the found footage format to tell their story. The film captures the chaos and panic of a catastrophic event by using a handheld camera, making the viewer feel like another witness to the disaster. Its found footage style provides a unique perspective on a genre usually portrayed on a large scale. Instead of focusing on military or scientific efforts to combat the creature, it follows a group of ordinary people simply trying to survive the catastrophe. This narrative choice immerses the viewer in the chaos, making it an intense and memorable experience. Directed by Matt Reeves and produced by J.J. Abrams, Cloverfield was launched with a viral marketing campaign that generated a lot of anticipation and mystery before its release. The film begins as a home video of a farewell party in New York, but quickly becomes a chaotic record of the night that giant creature attacked the city. Unlike other monster films that focus on military efforts to defeat the creature, Cloverfield is told from the perspective of a group of friends trapped in the city as it's destroyed. This gives the story a more human and relatable dimension. The camera the characters use becomes a witness to events, capturing everything from the initial confusion to the massive destruction caused by the monster. This approach makes the viewer feel as if they're watching a real recording of a catastrophe, enhancing the sense of realism. The film takes advantage of the found footage format to create an atmosphere of uncertainty. The shaky camera and unusual angles mean the viewer only sees fragments of the action, amplifying the sense of chaos and leaving much to the imagination. By not revealing the monster in full from the beginning, the film plays with the audience's anticipation and curiosity. Instead of presenting a clearly defined monster, it shows parts of the creature through blurry and quick shots, which helps create an aura of mystery and fear of the unknown. Cloverfield conveys the desperation and terror of its characters through a real-time narrative, making each decision the protagonists make feel urgent as they try to escape the city and find their loved ones. The film shows not only the monster's threat, but also the collateral effects, collapsing buildings, chaos among the population, and the danger of being trapped in a war zone. This makes the film's approach much more intimate than other monster movies, as it allows the viewer to closely experience the helplessness felt by the characters. From its marketing campaign, Cloverfield stood out for the mystery surrounding the creature and the origin of its attack. In the film, the monster's origins and nature are never clearly explained, which makes the threat even more disturbing. The handheld camera reflects the limited perspective of the characters, who don't have access to the information the audience typically expects in this type of film, like scientific data or military strategies. This lack of explanations reinforces the feeling of chaos and hopelessness, keeping the viewer in constant suspense. Cloverfield is known for some of its iconic scenes that make the most of the found footage format. Moments like the head of the Statue of Liberty rolling through the streets of New York, or the monster's attack in the dark of night, are striking for their scale, and the way the handheld camera captures the disaster's magnitude from a subjective point of view. The underground sequences, in which the characters face the monster's parasitic creatures, are also particularly claustrophobic and tense, showing how the found footage format can be used to convey the feeling of being trapped in a deadly situation.
¡Estoy en ello, joder!
Number 3. Rec 1 and 2. The Spanish film Rec and its sequel, Rec 2, earned their spot for their ability to blend visceral terror with the suffocating atmosphere that only found footage can achieve. These films immerse us in an adrenaline-filled experience, making us feel as if we're trapped alongside the characters in that doomed building. The connection between the two stories is seamless. The second part picks up right where the first left off, expanding the mystery and delivering a surprising twist on the origin of the outbreak. The way the handheld camera captures chaos and desperation makes these films iconic in the genre, providing an immersive experience from beginning to end. The first Rec introduces us to Angela Vidal, a reporter following a group of firefighters on what should be a routine night in Barcelona. But everything changes when they respond to a call at a building and suddenly find themselves trapped inside, sealed off by the authorities. What seemed like a simple intervention turns into a struggle for survival as the residents start behaving violently, turning into rabid creatures. Pablo's camera allows us to witness every attack and moment of panic, capturing the feeling of being locked in with danger lurking behind every door. The claustrophobic atmosphere is key here. The narrow hallways and darkness create a constant sense of danger, as if something could jump out of the shadows at any moment. And when we reach the final twist, revealing that the infection has a supernatural origin, the film leaves us stunned, showing that this is not just a zombie story, it's something much darker. Rec 2 picks up the events right where the first film left off, but this time from the perspective of a special forces team entering the building to contain the situation. This is where the story expands, revealing that the infection has a demonic origin, something far beyond what we imagined in the first film. This approach gives the sequel a fresh touch, maintaining the tension while adding a new layer of mystery. The agents discover that they're not only dealing with violent, infected individuals, but also with a malevolent presence that defies logical explanation. The soldiers' cameras offer us a new perspective, showing fear and struggle from within as the danger escalates. Both films make us feel as if we're there, trapped in the building alongside the characters. Every camera turn and every sudden movement immerses us in the action, making us feel the same fear and desperation as the protagonists. The use of natural light and confined spaces reinforces that sense of realism, and when the characters have no time to process what's happening, everything feels raw and immediate, making both films incredibly impactful. Angela Vidal becomes the emotional center of these films. Her evolution from a curious reporter to a survivor trapped in a nightmare makes us connect deeply with her. When she returns in the sequel, her presence provides continuity to the story, making us care about what's at stake. The movies Rec and Rec 2 deserve this place on the list as a perfect example of how horror can evolve and surprise us. With their found footage format, they make every second feel authentic and full of adrenaline. By combining the visceral with the supernatural, these films take us on a journey that starts with the most tangible horror and ends in a dark, unsettling mystery. Number 2. Paranormal Activity, 2007. Paranormal Activity takes the number 2 spot because it completely changed the way we perceive horror in the found footage genre. Instead of using flashy visual effects or terrifying creatures, this film opts for a minimalist approach, creating a constant sense of fear and discomfort. With a very modest budget, it managed to build a horror experience that captivated millions worldwide, becoming a box office phenomenon and a genre staple. Unlike other films, Paranormal Activity leans on psychological terror, using static cameras that keep us on edge, waiting for the worst as fear builds in the darkness. Directed by Oren Peli, Paranormal Activity follows Katie and Micah, a couple who begin experiencing strange events in their home. To understand what's happening, they set up video cameras throughout the house, capturing moments that escalate from simple noises to increasingly frightening and dangerous events. Slowly, the presence of an entity tied to Katie's dark past is revealed. Unlike many films in the genre that aim to scare with action-packed scenes or visible monsters, Paranormal Activity chooses a subtler path. Most of the time, the camera remains fixed in a room, making the everyday setting feel unnerving. It's that tense waiting, watching an open door or a dark corner, that sets our nerves on edge. The anticipation that something terrible could happen at any moment becomes the true source of terror. The film turns ordinary situations into something frightening. The nighttime scenes, when the characters are asleep and the house falls silent, are the scariest. The cameras capture seemingly insignificant details, like a door moving on its own or a faint noise in the darkness. These small events build up, making the viewer feel increasingly tense, expecting the unexplained to manifest more aggressively. It's like watching alongside the characters, feeling the helplessness of being unable to do anything. The dynamic between Katie and Micah adds an emotional layer to the story. Katie is terrified, while Micah insists on confronting the phenomenon with his camera and skepticism that blinds him to the seriousness of the situation. This creates tension between them and adds a touch of realism to the plot. We see how fear and disbelief can lead to decisions that only make things worse. As the events intensify, each of Micah's choices seems to draw the couple closer to an inevitable fate. The real terror of Paranormal Activity lies in what isn't seen. The film uses sounds, shadows, and the absence of answers to play with the viewer's imagination. It doesn't explicitly show the monster, instead suggesting its presence in a way that allows each viewer to fill in the gaps with their own fears. This approach makes the fear feel much more personal and profound, as if what we don't see is far scarier than anything on the screen. Paranormal Activity not only frightened its audience but also revived interest in the found footage style after the Blair Witch Project had paved the way. The film became a social event. People congregated in theaters to experience collective fear, sharing the scares and tension. This success inspired several sequels and convinced other studios that found footage could be an effective and accessible horror formula, helping bring this type of cinema back into the horror industry spotlight. Paranormal Activity deserves its spot for redefining what a horror film can be. With its minimalist approach and way of building fear through what's barely shown, it reminds us that true terror often lies in what we imagine and never fully see. Its cultural impact and ability to make the everyday terrifying make it an experience that goes beyond the screen and a modern classic in the found footage genre. It's a film that reminds us that sometimes the greatest fear is what we feel when we don't know what's on the other side of the door.
Go, fucking go!
Number 1. The Blair Witch Project, 1999. The Blair Witch Project takes the top spot because it didn't just popularize the found footage genre, it also transformed how horror was experienced in cinema. With a simple, low-budget approach, the film created an atmosphere of fear that, at the time, was completely new and terrifying for audiences. What makes this movie so effective is its use of suggestion and mystery to build tension. By showing almost nothing explicitly, the Blair Witch Project allows our imagination to do the work, resulting in a deeply immersive and psychological horror experience. Directed by Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, the Blair Witch Project tells the story of 3 film students, Heather, Josh, and Mike, who venture into the Maryland woods to make a documentary about the local legend of the Blair Witch. After interviewing some townspeople, they go into the forest, where they start getting lost and experiencing strange phenomena. As the days pass, the situation grows more desperate, and tensions rise as they sense something stalking them from the shadows. The film was designed to look like a real documentary, and this was key in drawing audiences into the story. The actors used their own names, and most of the dialogue was improvised, adding an authentic touch that made everything feel more believable. Additionally, the marketing strategy led many to believe they were watching real footage of missing people, creating a palpable confusion that made the experience even more impactful. As a result, many people went to theaters thinking they were seeing a true story, which only heightened the terror. As many might have noticed by now, Paranormal Activity adopted a similar approach, but one of the Blair Witch Project's greatest strengths is how it builds fear without showing anything explicitly. There are no monsters or flashy special effects, just unsettling noises at night, shadows that seem to move among the trees, and the constant feeling of being watched. By not directly revealing the witch or the threat, the film plays with the viewer's mind, making the horror more psychological. This leaves room for each person to imagine the worst, filling in the gaps with their own fears. making the experience much more intimate and terrifying. As the days go by, we see how Heather, Josh, and Mike struggle with fear, hunger, and the feeling of being hopelessly lost. The handheld camera captures their emotional breakdown in a raw way, making the audience witness their growing desperation. Heather's famous confession to the camera is a prime example of this, a scene where, through tears, she apologizes for leading her friends into this situation as the camera trembles in her hands. This moment is one of the most human and memorable in the film, showing her fear and regret in a real and heartbreaking way. Beyond its box office success, the Blair Witch Project changed independent horror filmmaking. With only a $60,000 budget and a gross of nearly $250 million, it proved that big effects aren't necessary to make a truly terrifying film. Its influence is evident in many films that followed, using the found footage style to create authentic horror experiences. Even today, it remains a reference for filmmakers looking to show that sometimes the scariest things are those we can't see. This list of the 7 best found footage films showcases how this subgenre has evolved to offer unique horror and suspense experiences. From the personal, chaotic perspective of Chronicle to the minimalist psychological atmosphere of the Blair Witch Project, each of these films has captured the essence of found footage, making the viewer feel like a direct witness to unbelievable events that feel too real to ignore. These films stand out for their ability to build tension and fear through the ordinary, the unknown, and what remains unseen, using handheld cameras and home recordings as tools to blur the line between fiction and reality. In some cases, like Wreck and Cloverfield, the format immerses us in a claustrophobic, frenetic experience, while in others, like Paranormal Activity, it confronts us with the invisible within the intimacy of a home. What makes these films so memorable is their ability to play with our expectations, challenging viewers to fill in the gaps with their own imagination. Ultimately, these works remind us that the most effective terror isn't always what is shown, but what is hinted at, the fear that settles in your bones and lingers long after the screen goes dark. For this reason, each of these films deserves a special place on this list and in the history of horror and found footage cinema. Hey, don't go just yet. If you enjoyed my video, I'd love to recommend another one for you to watch.